tonight's video, I'm going to be answering all of your personal questions about relationships, sex, birth control, and other things that you guys have asked me relating to physical intimacy, and honestly, just questions that maybe aren't so controversial as they are just not talked about enough openly. So hopefully this video will be educational, hopefully it will be non-triggering, and I'm going to try to relay information to the best of my ability in a neutral way. I really enjoy videos where I sit down and just talk. I know they're not for everyone, but it's really good practice for me to enunciate and speak clearly, and I'm thinking about tentatively starting some kind of a podcast in the far distant future. So if you guys are interested in that, then let me know in the comment section below, because it's on my perspective agenda. I do want to move quickly into the video because I have a lot of questions to answer, but I also want to briefly talk about the sponsor of tonight's video, which is Natural Cycles. And this is really exciting because it is the first all-natural, FDA-approved birth control app. That means it is the only app certified for use as contraception, and I think it's a great option for women who are looking for an alternative to things like synthetic hormones or surgical implants. A lot of you have asked me questions specifically on whether or not natural forms of birth control even exist, so this would definitely be a great one to research if you are considering that. And I do want to mention that finding a birth control option that is right for you is a very personal choice, and there's not going to be one method that's suitable for everyone. So this is just one option. Basically, Natural Cycles is a subscription service which works in conjunction with a thermometer that is accurate to 2 decimal places. And most home thermometers are only accurate to 1 decimal place, so you need a more precise thermometer, which you can purchase online, or you can purchase one directly from the app. And what you're going to do is take your temperature right when you wake up in the morning and then input your temperature directly into the app so that it can assess your individual cycle and calculate your fertility for the day. After that, the app will tell you whether or not the day is a red day or a green day. A red day indicates that you need to use backup protection during sexual intercourse, and a green day means that you do not need to use additional protection if you do not wish to. With typical use, the app is 93% effective, and with perfect use, it is 98% effective. The birth control pill is also 93% effective with typical use and over 99% effective with perfect use. Just to give you a little comparison, it does not protect against STIs or STDs because it is essentially a period tracking or fertility tracking method. So with new partners or partners that you are not in a long-term or monogamous relationship with, I would always recommend using backup protection like latex condoms or an allergen-free alternative for your own health and the health of your partner. The Natural Cycles app is available for $89.99 for a yearly subscription, which does include the thermometer, or you can purchase a monthly subscription for $9.99 per month. There are currently over 1 million women in 161 countries using the app, and I have just started using it recently myself, so I will definitely keep you guys posted on my progress. And sponsorship aside, I would love to know what types of birth control you are all using and what your experiences have been like, whether positive or negative. So feel free to leave me a comment below and tell me about that. I'd love to open a conversation on it in the comment section. So now we are going to get into the questions, and I've basically written them all down in my notepad on my phone, so I'm just going to kind of go through and answer them to the best of my ability. Now, of course, I'm not a doctor, although I do have a very extensive knowledge of medical science and medical things. This is like what I research in my spare time. Okay, the first question is, what is my feminine hygiene routine like? I personally avoid any type of like vaginal washes or vaginal hygiene products that I don't need. Stuff like that contains chemicals and synthetic fragrances, and it's basically asking for an infection or bacterial vaginosis. When I'm in the shower, I wash everything with unscented Castile soap. I like to use Dr. Bronner's. I'm sure there's a lot of options, but I keep it as simple as possible. I see people on YouTube doing some crazy things to their vagina. Your body is a well-functioning organism. You shouldn't really need any additional products besides a cleanser. That's my honest advice to you guys. The one exception is that when I go camping, I will use unscented baby wipes sometimes, like after I pee in the woods. because sometimes you don't have a choice and sometimes you're not showering for a couple of days. So if you're going to use like a wipe at home, I would go with something that's unscented and something that's made for like sensitive skin. The other thing that I would recommend is wearing breathable cotton underwear whenever possible, because that's going to keep the area clean and dry. There are a lot of synthetic fabrics that aren't breathable, like polyester and things that are made out of plastic, so definitely go cotton when you can. And when I'm on my period, I will use Thinx underwear, which are period underwear. They look like this. There's tons of different styles. I pulled my favorite two just to show you guys in case you've never seen them before. This is the Thinx Air, and then this is the organic cotton thong. I know I talk about these all the time, especially on Instagram, but this is truly an incredible product. They're so awesome, and you don't have to wear anything else when you're wearing the underwear. But I will also use the menstrual cup, and it really depends on my mood. I don't use them at the same time. I use them depending on what I'm doing and how I'm feeling that day. So I don't use tampons at all anymore. I don't use pads. I do have a video on the menstrual cup if you guys want to check that out. It's pretty old, but I'm a huge fan of both of those things. And then when it comes to personal lubrication, I always go for a water-based lube. There's typically water-based lube, and then there's silicone-based lubes. Some people will use like coconut oil. Again, with something like this, you definitely want to avoid synthetic fragrances. These are two that I really like. First of all, you should never be embarrassed for using lubrication. I actually will use lube when I'm inserting my menstrual cup too, so it comes in handy for other things besides sexual activities, but you definitely want to have lube on hand because it's going to prevent uncomfortable friction if there is a situation where you need additional lubrication. The pro to water-based is that it's gonna be more natural. I think it's more comfortable. Again, these are two brands that I really like, and I'll leave the details for these in the description box below. I think I actually like this one a little bit better. They're both organic, water-based, and work really well. Another disadvantage to silicone-based lubrication is that I believe they can break down latex condoms, which would decrease the efficacy when you're using a condom to protect against not just pregnancy, but also sexually transmitted infections and sexually transmitted disease. Choose wisely, and those are my recommendations for that. I've also gotten a ton of questions on hair removal around my bikini area, and if you guys want a video, I will do a separate one on like my full maintenance routine. I'm definitely down to do that. Let me know in the comment section below, because if I talk about it, I'm just gonna take up a lot of the time in this video. The next question is, how do you deal with different levels of libido in a relationship, especially when one partner has a much higher level than the other? Personally, I feel that in any relationship, there's going to be one partner with a higher libido or a higher sex drive. That's just kind of how it naturally works. In some cases, the difference might be really dramatic, and in some cases it might be just a small difference between both partners, but pretty much in every relationship that I've been in, there's always one partner that has a higher sex drive, and it isn't necessarily the man in heterosexual relationships. It just depends. So when that happens, I think the best thing to do is, first of all, communicate with your partner openly and honestly about the subject, because if you aren't talking about it, it's going to feel like the person with the higher sex drive is getting rejected, and that obviously never feels good. Even if it feels awkward, definitely initiate that conversation, because if you don't, it's only going to get worse, and it could create resentment over time in the relationship. So the first thing would be to open that line of communication, and after that, you guys can work together to find a solution that works for both of you. I think there are things we can do so that we feel more sexually inclined or sexually attracted to our partner, even if you are the person who has a lower sex drive. Now, this might sound sexist, but this is just a fact of biology, that the brains of men and women operate differently, like on a fundamental level, especially when it comes to things like sex or even relationships. So I think with women, we tend to feel more emotionally involved or emotionally connected during sex. And that doesn't mean you can't have casual sex, but it's just like we analyze it a lot more than men tend to do. You can ask probably any therapist and they'll tell you the same thing. A great thing to do is carve out time where you can feel intimate with your partner without feeling pressured to have sex. And that would include doing things where you just feel connected to your partner, and even things that involve physical touch but not sexual touch, like holding hands, giving hugs, sitting really close to your partner, and just spending time together, talking to each other, you know, doing something that's engaging. That's really going to make you feel more connected, and as a result, it's going to like affect the way that you look at your partner. And that might sound totally simple and like a lie, but it's true. So I would definitely recommend carving out time to feel an intimate connection in an effort to increase sexual desire with your partner if you are the one who has a lower libido. There's nothing worse than feeling like you have to have sex with your partner, because that creates like a sense that you aren't safe. You know, you always want to feel like your partner is in your safe zone. Something that can be really detrimental to relationships is engaging in sex when you really don't want to do it. It can make you feel just uncomfortable. It can make you feel pressured in a very negative way. It can create resentment, and it's going to make you feel sometimes really bad about yourself. And obviously you never want to feel that way, and I'm sure your partner doesn't want you to feel that way either. There are definitely ways to increase your sex drive. However, if you feel like you're never in the mood to have sex, this is probably going to be problematic for your relationship, because I think sex is a really important way for couples to stay connected, and it's an important part of the relationship in general. It doesn't have to be the focus of the relationship, but it's an important component, and I would say that most successful relationships include a healthy amount of sex, which will definitely vary from couple to couple, and we'll talk about that shortly. Something else you can do, which I would highly recommend, especially if you are the partner with the lower sex drive, is to put yourself in a position with your partner where you know that you are open to sex, but that it doesn't necessarily have to happen. And make sure you relay that to your partner. So maybe you can tell them that, you know, you want to be more attracted to them. You really want to increase that bond with your partner, and suggest that they do things that you really enjoy. For example, if you enjoy using a vibrator by yourself, then I would highly suggest bringing that into your sexual relationship with your partner. It's never something to be ashamed about, and maybe it's something that will unexpectedly be a bonding activity between you guys. There's a lot of different options you can explore with your partner that aren't just sex, and if you put yourself in a position to at least be open to the possibility of trying those things with your partner, it might make you feel a little bit less pressured. I would also always recommend therapy and couples counseling for people who are experiencing issues with this that are unresolved for long periods of time. I just think it can be incredibly helpful to talk about it with someone else who has an unbiased perspective of the situation. And at the end of the day, like, there is the real possibility that a very big difference in libido could be not an ideal match in the relationship. Okay, how do you get in touch with your sexuality and feel sexy? The biggest factor in feeling comfortable sexually and feeling sexy is to feel confident in yourself. And that is something that can only come from within, but if you're struggling with self-confidence, there are a lot of things you can do to boost your self-image. And something that always helps me is staying active and staying fit. And that doesn't mean I have to stay physically in the best shape, like looks-wise. It just means that I'm putting in the effort to keep my body in shape and to stay healthy, because when I'm working out and when I'm exercising, I just feel that I'm at my absolute best. I know there's going to be some criticism on this because I'm naturally slender, but I personally feel that, you know, we all come in different shapes and sizes, and of course all of us are beautiful, but you really have to believe that you are beautiful to exude that confidence, because if you don't think that about yourself, it's going to be hard to convince that to other people. It's like, the best example I can give to you guys is that a long time ago, I got a really, really horrible haircut. I was 19 or something. It was really short, and I really didn't feel like it fit my face shape. When people first asked me about it, I was like, oh, I don't like it. I don't feel like it looks good on me. Like, I just can't wait for my hair to get longer. And people were like, yeah, like, it's not the best. I was feeling very negative about it, and I decided to shift my entire perspective and just start telling myself that it was actually amazing. And I started telling other people that I really liked it. I was, you know, talking it up, like, oh my gosh, it's great, it's so low maintenance, I hardly even have to style it. And people really were so receptive to it, and their entire perception of it changed. Once I started owning it, people were seriously like, it looks amazing, it looks so good on you, like it's the perfect cut for your face. And even though it was not my favorite, I really feel that just kind of owning it was what made all of the difference in how people were viewing me. So if you want to be viewed as sexy, you have to really feel sexy. And the only person that can make you feel that way is yourself. Find things about your body that are unique and that you really like. And when you start to like those things, other people are gonna like them too. I think it can also be motivating to get in touch with your feminine or sexy side when you're with other women. So that's why I always encourage women to take like pole dancing classes or even gymnastics classes, like whatever it is, like bar classes, things that are just encouraging you to move your body and feel good in your skin. And you know, you might come out of it feeling a little bit different about yourself. What do you do if your partner has a fetish? Should you explore it with them even if it makes you feel uncomfortable? This is a great question. Deep down, I think there are all things that we gravitate towards and things that we don't like. I would always encourage you to explore different fantasies with your partner, unless those are things that are hurtful to you, physically harmful to you, physically harmful to someone else or something else. That is where I would definitely draw the line. I mean, I know there are people who also enjoy pain as a means of pleasure, and that is something that I've never been into, and I'm totally not judging, but I would say I would only explore that if it's really something that you feel comfortable with, and if it's something that you know, there's like safe words involved and there's a lot of safe practices happening. But typically I steer away from anything that's painful or anything that's like cruel. That's just not something that I've ever been interested in. But there are lots of fantasies that you can fulfill that don't involve afflicting pain on other people, and there are some fetishes that would be considered unconventional to a lot of people. Like I can't think of any off the top of my head, so I'm just going to go with feet. A lot of people think feet are gross, a lot of people think they're weird, a lot of people would probably not be inclined to experiment with feet. If my partner came to me and told me they really liked feet, I would say, cool, let's explore those possibilities. Give me more information or tell me what specifically you like, and I'll see if it's something that I'm comfortable with. You never want to make somebody feel stupid for what they like or make them feel degraded for what they might be interested in sexually. I think that's sends a very negative message. I would say often people may be put off by certain fetishes because they're just not familiar with that territory, but you know, it might be something that you try and you actually really like as well, especially because it's pleasing your partner. But it also might be something that you try and you don't like, in which case I think it's okay to say that it's something you don't enjoy. But maybe you guys can meet in the middle somewhere, or maybe it's just not something you like, you know, but definitely give it a shot as long as it's not harmful to you or anyone else around you. I also would like to point out that feet are inherently cool because they carry you throughout life. Some of you may know that I have an obsession with socks, and it's not sexual at all to me, but I wonder if it could be considered an unsexual fetish because I really love socks, like more than the average person. Okay, moving on. What do you do if you have trouble orgasming during sex or sexual activity with your partner, and should you fake it? This can definitely be problematic for both men and women, but I would say more often it's something that women struggle with because we're just more complex, okay? Sometimes things take a little bit longer, and you really have to be comfortable with your partner in general, and you know, in a vulnerable place to experience pleasure in front of another person. So if you're not feeling like safe, secure, comfortable, then it's going to be really, really difficult to get in that mental state. But truthfully, orgasms are very closely linked to our brain. So you might think that they have everything to do with your like vagina or your penis, but they actually have a lot to do with your brain. This is why some people can reach an orgasm without even having physical touch. Or if you've ever experienced a wet dream, which can happen to both men and women, by the way, then that is purely related to psychology. So you definitely want to feel completely comfortable with your partner, and this is going to be a lot harder if it's someone you don't know well, which is one of the reasons why I have never been interested in one-night stands or like having sexual relationships with people that I don't know. I've definitely had casual relationships with people, but it's typically people I've been friends with for a while or people that I've known. I've just never been someone who's interested in one-night stands because I don't really think you can fully relax around someone that you don't know. Now that might just be me. For me, I feel like I need to trust the person and I need to have some sort of bond on like a mental level with the person as well. Of course, chemistry is also important, but I tend to build chemistry after getting to know someone. Overall, I would say being comfortable around your partner is really important, and if you're feeling insecure, if you're feeling not confident in any way, that can definitely affect your ability to orgasm or your ability to even enjoy the experience, because you're gonna constantly be thinking about other things in your head. If you don't feel good about your body or you're trying to like hide certain flaws, it's gonna be really hard to enjoy yourself. At a certain level, you just have to embrace your body and embrace all of its flaws, and even just looking at it at like a basic level of how incredible the human body is and how incredible your body is, and all of the functions it carries out on a daily basis. Like, that's something that makes me feel confident, and that's probably because I'm super interested in science and medicine and just metabolic function in general. But if it helps, then use that. I would always discourage people from faking an orgasm because I think it sends the wrong message to your partner that something is pleasurable to you when it might not be. Okay, next question. This is a great one because it kind of intertwines with some things that we've talked about earlier. And the question is, how do you keep a spark alive and not get bored of a partner? Do you still get excited thinking about your partner? And also, do you think it's normal to daydream about other people sexually? The first part of this question is pretty easy to answer. In a long-term relationship, things are going to naturally become more redundant and more like less exciting. They just do. But that doesn't mean they have to ever feel boring. And I think the most important thing you can do is to make sure that you're continuing to do new things with your partner. That does not have to be sexually at all, but that definitely can include things that you're doing in your sex life. If you're experiencing new experiences with your partner, you're going to continue to find ways where you're feeling connected, you know, whether it's travel, whether it's just trying new restaurants, whether it's just playing a new board game. Like, little things really make a big difference in the long term. But if you're sitting on your phone constantly or you're not making time for each other, then it's gonna feel boring and you're gonna feel like roommates and you're not gonna have that sense of connection. Something that can be really helpful is finding a new hobby you enjoy with your partner that you guys can explore together, and that can create, again, just a sense of connection. And maybe a great thing to do would be to start cooking with the other person. This is something that Nick and I try to do. I feel like I've talked about this in a previous video, but Nick and I both enjoy cooking. We have very different styles of cooking, but it's really fun for us to get in the kitchen, try a new recipe that sounds good to both of us, and it always is like a connecting experience, even though it's just something really simple. So you definitely want to continue doing new things with your partner and always continue learning about your partner, because the chances are they've been around for a lot longer than your relationship, and there's really never a shortage of things you can learn about someone else. Even after many, many years, there's going to be new things that you're continuing to learn. That might come down to like asking questions about their life, asking questions about their parents, asking about their interests. I definitely still get excited thinking about Nick. I still feel very attracted when I look at him. I mean, there are moments when I feel like I fucking hate him, but I still look at him and think that I really love him, and I look at him and I think that he's just really attractive to me. And it's not just a physical thing, it's a little bit deeper than that. So I do still feel that after over 5 years of being with my boyfriend. But that being said, I absolutely think it's normal to daydream about other people sexually. You guys can fight me on this if you want to, but I personally believe this is just like a natural part of how our brains work. It doesn't mean you're cheating. It doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. You might even find that when you're in bed with your partner, you're thinking about another sexual fantasy. I think that's probably a lot more common than we would like to admit, and I don't personally think there's anything wrong with that as long as it's not something you're acting on. Our brains are very complex, and some things we are just never going to understand, but like naturally we are going to be attracted to a lot of different people. I've met people in my relationship with Nick where I feel like there's a sense of attraction, but I don't feel compelled to ever act on it because I feel committed to my relationship and I feel happy in a monogamous relationship. It's something that I much would prefer to any type of open relationship or polyamory or anything like that. So I don't feel compelled to like act on those impulses, but I recognize that being attracted to other people is totally natural, and fantasizing about other people is something that I think is biologically normal. Kind of on the same level, somebody asked, is porn cheating? So if your partner is watching porn, does that constitute as cheating? I would say no, but I do think that sometimes in relationships, porn can become problematic if a partner is developing an unhealthy obsession to porn or like an addiction, which is definitely a thing. And in that case, that might be something that needs to be discussed with a therapist or a third party. But if your partner is watching porn periodically and it's making you feel like insecure or a certain way, I don't really know how to tell you to get over that, besides it's natural for you to feel like jealous probably, but I wouldn't worry about it. Like I wouldn't stress out about it at all, and it doesn't mean that your partner isn't interested in you. When people watch porn, it's often about fantasies that they don't even want to act on in real life. I wouldn't overthink it, I wouldn't overanalyze it. If it becomes a problem, then seek outside counseling, but otherwise, don't sweat it. This video is getting really long. Next question. If your partner finishes too quickly every time, is there anything out there that could help them last longer besides Viagra? How do you approach the topic? Okay, what this person is referring to is premature ejaculation, which is a really common problem, particularly in men. I would assume that maybe women can experience it as well, but I've never personally known any women, but I would say there are for sure things you can do. One of them is called edging, which is where you bring your partner to a state of almost reaching an orgasm, but then you refrain, and then you bring them back to it, and then you bring them down without them actually orgasming. And then you continue doing that, and that can actually increase their endurance. So that would be one option if you guys want to look into it a little bit more. Again, it's called edging. Something else you and your partner can do is refrain from masturbation, because that will often encourage like really quick gratification or reaching an orgasm very quickly. So if you're continuously doing that as a habit, then it might carry over into your sexual relationship with your partner. So you might want to take a break from that, but it might be helpful to do it together so that it doesn't feel like you're singling your partner out. So sit down with your partner and maybe make it into a fun kind of challenge where both of you will refrain from masturbation for a week, a month, whatever. Those are two basic suggestions, but there might be more. If you have any more, leave them below. Okay, after the honeymoon phase is over in a relationship, what is considered a healthy sex life as far as how many times per week, per month, etc.? This is for sure going to vary based on your own relationship, so there's no like real stipulation as far as what is normal. It's going to be what's normal for your relationship specifically. Without being a sex therapist, because I'm not, I would say if you're not having sex on a consistent basis, then that would be an indication of a problem. So if you're used to having sex every week, and then suddenly you don't have sex for months, you know, of course things come up in our lives, so there are always going to be periods in a relationship where sex is going to be lower, it might be higher, it's going to like vary. But if there's like a really big gap, or you stop noticing that there is a consistency in your sex life, that would be the time to step back and kind of evaluate what's going on. I would also say that the more you are having sex in your relationship, the more connected you're going to be. So it's only going to strengthen the relationship, but that doesn't mean you can't have a healthy relationship while having less sex. If you're feeling stressed out about it, if you feel anxious about it, if you're experiencing any type of sexual repulsion towards your partner, like if you feel like you really don't want to have sex with them, or you really don't want to be intimate with them at all, those are all signs that you need to figure out what's going on, or at least have a conversation with your partner. There's so many questions left on this list, but I'm only going to take like 2 more. I say that as if I'm on like a talk show. And then if you guys want, we can make this into like a series where we do periodic videos and I can answer more of these questions. Like if it's helpful, I'm happy to do it. When you first realized you were interested in women, how did you approach those relationships? Did you find them to be easier to navigate than those you've had with men? I guess this was asked because I've been pretty transparent about the fact that I've dated women in the past and that I've had relationships with other women. I think that deep down, a lot of women are curious about being with other women. And maybe deep down, a lot of men are curious about being with other men, although there's probably more stigma around that, but judgment free on my end. I think that people in general are just curious, and sometimes they're like scared to act on those attractions or those emotions. When I first started feeling attracted to women, I think it was in like middle school or high school, but I always felt attracted to men as well. When I started getting involved in relationships with women, I really just kind of went for it. I tend to like think about things in a different way, and I don't really feel scared of rejection, even though it's not pleasant. I've definitely been rejected before by men and women, and it's not ideal, but it also doesn't have to be a big deal. And even if somebody is not interested in you romantically or sexually, they're still probably flattered that other people are interested in them. So you don't have to feel bad about feeling attracted to someone who doesn't like you back. And I just think that life is too short to like live in fear and not act on things, or at least not explore possibilities. I can understand how a relationship with a different sex could be intimidating, and I would recommend maybe going on a dating site with only women, so at least you can start talking to other women and flirting and things like that. I have very limited experience with dating sites in general, but when I moved to New York, I was on a site very briefly called OkCupid, which indicates that I'm old, and I met a couple of women on there, one of which I dated and a few of which I'm still friends with. That wasn't my introduction to dating women, but that might be an option. Alternatively, like going to different events where there are other women who might like other women, like gay bars. When I was in New York, there were different types of like mixers that you could go to. They weren't called mixers, but it was essentially the same thing. And you know, when you know that everyone's there for kind of the same thing, there's a lot less pressure. I never met anyone through any of those events to my knowledge, but it might be a good starting place. And then if you find yourself in a situation where you're with someone else and things are like escalating sexually, I would just try to relax. Also, I feel that women are really accepting, so yeah, that's my advice. I've now changed my camera battery twice, which means I need to wrap this up. Okay, this is a great question. Someone asked, do you still get regular STD testing while being in a monogamous long-term relationship? And I wanted to touch on sexually transmitted infections and STDs, but I didn't really get around to it. So this is a great place to maybe end the video. In my relationship with Nick, I think I have had 3 STD tests, not because I thought my boyfriend was cheating on me. The first time we both had a test was when we first started dating, and I asked if Nick would get tested, which is something that I like to do when I'm entering a monogamous relationship, like when things get a little bit more serious, and he agreed to it. We got tested. It was like very comfortable and nothing felt awkward or anything like that. And then I got 2 additional tests when I had like routine pap smears. The reason that I got them was because my doctor just asked if I wanted it included. And at the time, I think I had health insurance, so I just went ahead and did it. I mean, it's always a good idea to get tested. You can never go wrong from getting an STD test, and I would always encourage you to like get regular testing in general, especially because there are some STIs and STDs that can take a while to show up on a test. So it's never a bad idea, and there are a lot of places where you can get screened for low cost even if you don't have insurance. A lot of clinics do like things on a sliding scale depending on what your income is, and generally even if you make a decent amount of money, it's still affordable. And the facilities are often really clean and welcoming. I mean, I love going to the doctors. A lot of you guys know this. I love anything medical related. Not that I'm condoning like Western medicine all the time, but I just like people who are knowledgeable about the human body. It's like attractive to me. I might be an outlier, and I know there's not a lot of people that probably enjoy routine checkups, but I'm a fan. I've always been someone who is a proponent for safe sex, so I've never been scared to initiate that conversation, and I don't think it has to be something that's embarrassing or like in any way a deterrent to the mood. And if it feels like that, then you might be with the wrong partner, because protecting your health is important and it should always be a priority. And I do want to talk about a situation that I personally had, because there's just a lot of stigma around diseases, around infections. It can make people feel scared to be open about their health. So this is a great story for you guys. The very first time that I had sex, I was in high school. It was somebody that I was friends with, and we had an entire conversation before it actually happened on AOL Instant Messenger. We talked about using protection, we talked about being safe, which in hindsight is like really commendable, and I'm giving myself a pat on the back for that. But after that first experience, which was not a great one, and it was consensual for sure, but you know, your first experience is not always the best. After that happened, I actually didn't have sex for the rest of high school because I just kind of felt like I wasn't ready for it. I felt like I had kind of rushed into it out of intrigue, and maybe a bit of pressure from people, like friends of mine, not from the guy. But after that initial experience, when I went to get my next pap smear, which used to be a requirement every year for women, now I think it's recommended that you get one every 3 years. I'm always someone who wants to get one every year just to like be on top of it, but whatever. I went to get a pap smear. My pap smear came back abnormal, and I tested positive for HPV, which is the human papilloma virus. If you are a sexually active individual, or you are at any point in your life, the chances of you contracting HPV is something like over 90% or something. There's a lot of different strains of it, but it's particularly detrimental in some cases for women because there are strains that can cause cervical cancer. But I tested positive for HPV even though I had used protection and engaged in sex as safe as it possibly could have been, and I had cervical dysplasia, which means that my cervical cells had morphed to a level that could become cancerous. Now at the time it was CIN2, I remember specifically. There are, I think, 3 grades of cervical dysplasia. CIN 1, 2, and 3. So I had like the mid-grade one, and typically when you have cervical dysplasia, or even when you have HPV, that's a virus that your body can actually fully eradicate. So typically those cell changes will reverse over time in a healthy body and go back to healthy, normal cervical cells. So my health practitioner at the time recommended that I get a procedure called a LEAP, which is where they physically remove part of your cervix, which grows back, by the way, in case you guys are interested in science. And I had this procedure. It was very scary because I was young and I didn't know anyone else who had had it. Now I know several friends of mine who have had the same procedure, and a lot of people who have had biopsies after getting abnormal pap results and things like that. But it was something that was you know, a little bit traumatic. However, that was an experience for me which led me to do a lot of research so that I wasn't freaking out, so that I wasn't scared, and it also broke that stigma to me about people being dirty for contracting STIs or STDs or anything, because, you know, I was responsible and I took as much precautions as I could have, and I still contracted HPV. Since then, I have tested negative for HPV for like probably 10 years, but as a result, I do get a pap smear still yearly because I just want to be on top of that. I wanted to share this with you guys just to tell you that even if you're being safe, you can still, you know, contract an STI or an STD. And if you do contract one of those, it's not the end of the world. You want to just educate yourself as much as possible, gain as much knowledge about the subject as you possibly can, and then take the necessary steps so that you can handle the situation. A lot of STIs are curable, but there are a lot that can really affect your reproductive organs, especially if you are female. Somebody also sent me a private message and asked if it's possible to find a new partner after being diagnosed with a sexually transmitted disease, and how do you disclose it with a new partner? Absolutely, it is 100% possible. Medicine has advanced so much that even things that are lifelong conditions are very treatable. Nothing related to medicine is gross to me except vomit, and I don't think I'll ever get over that. But other than that, I read a lot about diseases and different types of things, and it's like incredibly fascinating to me. It's not gross, and if somebody came to me and told me that they had a condition, I would first feel very receptive to their honesty, because I think honesty is incredibly important. And if I really liked that person, it probably wouldn't affect the fact that I wanted to be with them. Now, it might depend on the situation and how serious things were, but I never think anyone should be ashamed to talk about that stuff openly, and I would always encourage you to be 100% transparent with your partner, because if you're not, you're doing a disservice to them. In some cases, it could even be illegal. Honesty is just always the best. I think that's probably where we'll end this video. We've talked about feet. We've talked about, I don't know, a lot of different things. Was this interesting to you? Should this be a recurrent topic of discussion? I have, like I said, many more questions to answer that I didn't get a chance to hit. And if you guys have additional questions, feel free to leave those below. If you guys have any feedback, I'd love to hear from you in that way as well. Or you want to share any experience of your own, I would love to talk about that. I always think it's nice for people to contribute their thoughts in the community. It makes us all feel a little bit closer. It makes us all feel less alone. And honestly, sometimes it's nice to ask questions from behind a screen if you're really struggling with something, and maybe other people in the community can chime in on them. Like, I personally always read all of the comments, and I really try to respond thoughtfully and with meaning and give you my honest advice. Thank you guys so much for watching. I look forward to seeing you in my next video, and I will talk to you then.